Have you ever noticed that when you're at your weakest, when your heart is breaking, your world is falling apart, that's when the narcissist suddenly shows up? Not to help, not to heal, but to feed. They smell vulnerability the way sharks smell blood in water. And while you're reaching out for comfort, they're reaching in for control. When you're at your weakest, something shifts in the air around a narcissist. They can sense it, not in a compassionate way, but in a predatory one. Vulnerability to a narcissist is like an open door. It's not an invitation you give, it's an opportunity they take. When you're hurting, your boundaries soften, your guard drops, you stop questioning motives because you're too busy trying to survive the moment. That's when the narcissist steps in, with their familiar blend of false concern and calculated timing. They don't come to lift you up, they come to take advantage of the space your pain creates. They'll start by mirroring your emotions. They'll say things like, "I know exactly how you feel," or "You can always count on me." They'll offer comfort that feels genuine, even intimate. But if you look closely, the focus isn't truly on you. It's on what they can extract from you, your trust, your gratitude, your emotional dependency. They know that when people are broken, they crave connection more than anything. So they become exactly what you need in that moment: a listener, a savior, a shoulder to cry on, not out of love, but strategy. In these moments, the narcissist plays the long game. Their goal isn't immediate satisfaction, it's to secure their position in your life when you're most impressionable. They know that the mind associates comfort with safety, so when they appear to soothe your pain, your brain begins to link your sense of relief with their presence. It's a subtle psychological bond, and it's one of the most nearest traps a narcissist can set, because now you don't just want them around, you feel like you need them. But over time, the mask slips. You start to notice how their help comes with conditions, how every favor becomes a debt, how every comfort comes with a cost. They'll remind you of all the times they were there for you. They'll use phrases like, "After everything I've done for you," or "You wouldn't have made it without me." What began as care slowly transforms into control. Your vulnerability, once genuine, becomes ammunition in their hands. They use your pain as proof of their superiority, turning your weakest moments into stories that elevate them and diminish you. What makes this so painful is how invisible it can be. You don't realize you've been exploited until you start to heal, until the fog begins to lift and you see the pattern for what it was. It's disorienting, even heartbreaking, to recognize that the person who seemed to save you was actually the one benefiting from your suffering. But that realization is also the beginning of freedom. Because once you see that your vulnerability is sacred, not something to be used, but something to be protected, you take back your power. The next time you find yourself in pain, you won't reach for the hand that hurt you. You'll reach inward, where real healing begins, in your own strength, your own self-compassion, and your own unbreakable truth. False empathy is one of the most deceptive tools in a narcissist's arsenal. It's the act of pretending to understand and care deeply for you, not because they genuinely feel your pain, but because your pain gives them access to your emotions. When you're going through something difficult, a narcissist steps in like a performer entering a stage. They'll study your expressions, your tone, and your words, mirroring them perfectly. They'll nod, touch your hand, maybe even cry with you. On the surface, it looks like deep empathy, but it's a script, and you're not in on it. At first, it's easy to believe them. Their timing feels divine. Just when you think no one cares, they appear, offering understanding words that seem to pierce your soul. They might say things like, "I can't stand to see you hurt," or "I'm the only one who really gets you." And in that moment, you feel seen, something every hurting person longs for. But here's the truth. Narcissists don't connect with your pain. They connect with your reaction to their attention. They feed off the trust you give them in return. Their empathy is not a gift, it's bait. Once they've earned your emotional trust, the dynamic subtly shifts. You begin to lean on them for advice, comfort, reassurance. They encourage it because dependency strengthens their hold. They'll respond to your tears not with genuine care, but with satisfaction, a silent sense of power that says, "I'm the one you need." The more you open up, the more they learn about what breaks you, what scares you, what you crave most. Every confession becomes data they'll eventually use against you. And when the moment comes, when you stop serving their ego or when you begin to question their behavior, that false empathy turns to cold detachment. Suddenly, the person who once comforted you seems irritated by your emotions. They'll say, "You're too sensitive." Or, "I've tried to help you, but nothing's ever enough." Their tone shifts from warmth to blame. What once felt like connection becomes a weapon. You start doubting yourself, wondering if you imagined their earlier kindness. That confusion is exactly what they want, because as long as you're questioning your reality, they're still in control of it. The tragedy is that people with real hearts often take the longest to recognize false empathy. You want to believe that someone who comforted you cared for you. You replay their words, their gestures, trying to make sense of the shift. But narcissistic empathy was never about you. It was about their reflection in your eyes, the version of themselves that looks good while you're hurting. True empathy doesn't change with convenience. It doesn't demand repayment. It doesn't disappear when it's no longer admired. The next time someone shows you comfort, look for consistency, not charm. Real empathy doesn't just feel good, it feels safe. It allows you to heal without fear of owing anything back. Because genuine love never uses your pain as a ladder to climb higher. It sits beside you, silently, until you can stand again on your own. Control disguised as care is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation a narcissist uses. It begins so subtly that you don't even notice it happening. At first, their involvement feels like protection, like someone finally stepping in to help you carry the weight of your life. They offer advice that sounds wise, make decisions that seem thoughtful, and take on responsibilities that look supportive. You may even feel lucky to have someone who cares so deeply. But underneath that surface of concern lies a hidden motive: dominance. Narcissists don't help to empower you, they help to own you. They frame their control as love. They'll say things like, "I just want what's best for you," or, "You don't have to worry, I'll handle it." And because their tone feels comforting, you let them take charge. Slowly, they start making choices on your behalf: what you should wear, who you should talk to, where you should go, how you should feel. Every act of care carries an unspoken rule: do it my way, or I withdraw my affection. Over time, you stop recognizing it as control because it's wrapped in the language of love. The danger is that it doesn't feel oppressive at first. It feels safe. When someone claims to care, you naturally trust them. You interpret their constant presence as devotion rather than domination. But the moment you resist, the moment you assert independence, their true nature surfaces. Suddenly, that care turns into criticism. They'll say you're ungrateful, that you don't appreciate all they've done for you. They'll twist your boundaries into betrayal and your autonomy into selfishness. It's emotional blackmail disguised as moral concern. This is how the narcissist keeps you small, not through overt cruelty, but through disguised compassion. Every "I'm just trying to help" is another link in the invisible chain they build around you. They want you to depend on them, to consult them before every decision, to believe that your stability is tied to their presence. That way, even when they're not physically controlling you, they still control how you think. You start second-guessing yourself, wondering if they might be right, if you really are too fragile or too lost without them. What makes this kind of manipulation so effective is that it feels like love until it hurts. You don't realize you're being controlled until your freedom is gone. You wake up one day and notice that your choices aren't yours anymore. They're filtered through someone else's expectations. And the hardest part? They've convinced you that this is what love looks like. But real care doesn't demand obedience. Real love doesn't shrink you, it strengthens you. Someone who truly cares will celebrate your independence, not punish it. They'll guide you when you ask, but they'll never take the steering wheel from your hands. Because love and control cannot coexist. The moment care becomes conditional, it stops being care at all. True connection empowers both people to grow, not one to rule over the other. Dependency is the lifeblood of a narcissist. It's the quiet current that keeps them powerful, relevant, and in control. From the beginning, they know exactly how to build it, step by step, moment by moment, until you can't tell where your needs end and their influence begins. They thrive on the feeling of being indispensable, of knowing you can't make a move without their approval or validation. And the cruel irony is that they often create the very wounds that make you dependent on them in the first place. At first, they position themselves as your rescuer. They're the one who listens when no one else does, the one who helps when you're overwhelmed, the one who seems to always have the answers. You begin to rely on them emotionally, to share your fears, your secrets, your confusion. They encourage it because every piece of your vulnerability is another layer of control for them. The more you confide, the more they learn about how to keep you close. They make themselves your anchor, but what you don't realize is that the anchor is chained to them. Once you're emotionally dependent, the shift begins. Their support becomes inconsistent. One moment warm and available, the next distant or critical. You start to feel anxious, trying to figure out what you did wrong. That's exactly what they want. Narcissists use unpredictability as a psychological weapon. When their affection feels uncertain, you work harder to earn it. You start modifying your behavior, your opinions, even your personality just to keep their approval. The dynamic transforms into an emotional addiction, one they control completely. Over time, they expand that dependency into other areas. Maybe they control finances, decisions, or even your social circle. They isolate you subtly, often under the guise of love. I just don't trust those people, or you don't need anyone else, I'm here for you. Sounds caring, but it's really a tactic to cut off your sources of strength. The fewer people you can turn to, the more you turn to them. It's a slow, quiet erasure of your independence until you begin to doubt your ability to survive without them. This dependency benefits the narcissist in two ways. First, it keeps them feeling powerful. Your need validates their superiority. Second, it guarantees supply, the constant flow of attention, praise, and emotional energy they crave. You become both their admirer and their prisoner. And when you finally start pulling away, they panic. They'll suddenly act kind again, remind you of the good times, or even make promises to change. But it's never about love. It's about maintaining control. Breaking that dependency feels terrifying because they've trained you to believe that without them, you're nothing. But the truth is, they needed you far more than you ever needed them. They just convinced you otherwise. The moment you begin to trust yourself again, to make decisions without their approval, to find comfort without their voice, that's when their power starts to fade. Healing begins the moment you realize that dependency was never love. It was control dressed as connection. Real love doesn't bind you. It frees you. You said, when you begin to heal, something changes, not just within you, but in the narcissist's world too. Your strength threatens their control. For so long, they've thrived on your pain, your confusion, and your dependency. You were their mirror, their supply, the person who made them feel powerful through your need for them. But healing breaks that cycle. It means you're seeing clearly now, recognizing patterns, setting boundaries, and valuing yourself again. And that terrifies them, because your light exposes everything they've worked so hard to keep hidden. In the early stages of your recovery, the narcissist will often pretend to support your growth. They'll say things like, I'm proud of how far you've come, or you seem so much happier now. But underneath those words is discomfort, even panic. Your confidence means they can no longer manipulate you with guilt or fear. They can't bait you into explaining yourself, apologizing, or chasing their approval. So they shift tactics, they might become dismissive, critical, or even mocking. They'll say you've changed as if that's something bad. They'll call you selfish, cold, or ungrateful. What they're really saying is, you're not controllable anymore. This is one of the hardest parts of healing, realizing that the stronger you become, the more they'll try to pull you back into old patterns. They might suddenly bring up your past mistakes, reminding you of times when you were vulnerable or dependent. They'll test your new boundaries, seeing if they can still provoke a reaction. And if you stay calm, if you no longer give them the emotional outburst they're used to, they'll escalate. Because without your emotional energy, they're left with their own emptiness, something they spend their whole lives trying to avoid. Your growth is like holding up a mirror to their inadequacy. When you start valuing yourself, you're showing them what genuine self-worth looks like, something they don't understand. Narcissists can't handle equality, they survive on hierarchy. They need to feel above you. When you rise, that illusion shatters. They'll try to diminish your progress, minimize your achievements, or undermine your confidence. They'll say things like, you think you're better than everyone now, or you've been brainwashed. It's not that they truly believe these things, it's that your healing makes them irrelevant. But here's the beautiful truth. Once you begin to reclaim your power, their control no longer works. Every boundary you set weakens their influence. Every act of self-care reclaims a piece of your identity, and every time you refuse to engage in their drama, you're teaching them that your peace is no longer negotiable. The narcissist may never admit it, but they know when they've lost control. Healing, then, isn't just recovery, it's rebellion. It's standing tall where you were once small. It's choosing your voice over their approval. And the moment you stop letting their opinion define your worth, you win. Because the greatest revenge against a narcissist isn't confrontation or anger, it's living freely, authentically, and without needing them at all. True healing begins when you finally stop waiting for the narcissist to change. It's the moment you realize that no amount of explaining, fixing, or forgiving will ever make them see your heart clearly. For so long, you've believed that if you could just love them harder, communicate better, or stay patient enough, they'd finally wake up, that they'd recognize your loyalty and meet you halfway. But narcissists don't meet anyone halfway. They expect the world to bend to them, and every compromise you make only teaches them how much you're willing to tolerate. Healing begins the moment you decide that your peace matters more than their approval. At first, this realization feels heavy. You might grieve the version of them you wished existed, the person you hoped they could become if only they'd let you in. It's painful to accept that the love you offered with such sincerity was met with manipulation, that your compassion was used as leverage. But as painful as that truth is, it's also liberating. Because once you stop waiting for them to be different, you stop being controlled by their potential. You start living in reality, your reality, where your needs, feelings, and dreams are valid again. The path to self-reliance isn't about becoming hard or cold. It's about becoming whole. It's understanding that you can be kind without being used, giving without being drained, and loving without losing yourself. You begin to rebuild trust in your own judgment, piece by piece. You learn to listen to the quiet voice inside you, the one that always knew when something felt wrong, even when you ignored it. That voice is your compass, the one the narcissist tried to silence through gaslighting and blame. Healing means giving that voice permission to lead again. As you detach, you'll start noticing small but powerful shifts. You no longer feel the need to explain your choices. You stop apologizing for setting boundaries. You begin to feel comfortable in your own company, realizing that solitude is not loneliness, it's freedom. You learn to provide yourself the validation you once sought from them. You start celebrating your progress, no matter how small, because every step forward is an act of defiance against the lies they made you believe about your worth. And over time, something remarkable happens. The anxiety that once consumed you begins to fade. The constant overthinking quiets. You find peace not because life is perfect, but because you're no longer tied to someone who thrives on your chaos. You start to see yourself not as broken, but as resilient. Not as a victim, but as a survivor who has reclaimed their voice and power. Healing after narcissistic abuse isn't about forgetting them. It's about remembering yourself. It's realizing that the love you were trying to give to someone else was always meant for you. When you finally start giving yourself that love, like without apology, without fear, you don't just recover, you rise, you